Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I'm delighted to have Tim Lebon here today talking about the view from above. It's going to be an interesting presentation with a lot of interaction. So there is a chat window. Make sure your chat window is open, and to make sure that you're comfortable with it, just go ahead and type in where you're from and what is your experience with Stoicism. So you have three choices: very familiar, not familiar, or in the middle. So if you're very familiar, you say 3. If you are in the middle, you say 2. If you are not familiar, you say 1. So just put, where you're from and the level. All right. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tim. Tim, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Hello from the UK on what I know is a very special day for many of you in America. And I'm speaking from the UK. So can I say a very happy 4th of July to everybody. So I'm going to share my screen in a minute because I'm going to be talking to you and using a PowerPoint presentation. So you can see things as well as hear me. I hope that's going to be helpful for you. So welcome to the View from Above on the pandemic. So my name's Tim Lebon, and some of you may know me. Perhaps put in the chat if you know me, either from a course you've been on or from actually meeting me at Stoicon, for instance. So I've written a couple of books, and that's a bit more about me. So I'm a founder member of the Modern Stoicism team. I'm the guy that does all the statistics to show how Stoic Week and SMRT recently help people. I'm a CBT therapist. I work in NHS and private practice. And these days, actually, since the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of work internationally via Zoom, Stoic Life Coaching and CBT as well. So here's the plan for today. I'm really looking forward to it, actually. We're going to look at the view from above in general. Now, I don't know how many of you are Stoics. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the view from above. I'm not assuming that you are familiar with it, but if you are, that'll be helpful. We're going to do an experiential exercise very early on, which will be a nice introduction to what we're doing today. I'm going to be giving a very simple structure for Stoicism, which I generally use to start with anyway with people. And then I'm going to be talking about what that structure makes, what it leaves out, which are two virtues you might not have heard of before: transcendence and humanity. And they're particularly related to the view from above. So we're going to really kind of, where we're leading to is a meditation on the view from above in the time of pandemic. So it's a view from above exercise that I've written specially for today. So I really hope it's helpful and interesting for you. We're going to look at whether this can help us make Stoicism even better, incorporating this into our structure for Stoicism. And then you're going to have your breakout groups with thinking about the take homes and whether any maxims. In Stoicism, one of the ideas is that we have maxims ready at hand when we kind of stuck in traffic or someone irritates us. I'm just looking at the chat. Someone's put, is the view from above related to seeing the big picture? Yes, it is. It's seeing the very big picture. It's not so much the helicopter view, which is what you might get in CBT. It's the view from being an astronaut or even beyond that. So how does that sound, everyone? Shall we get cracking? Starting off with a little bit about the view from above. So the ancient Stoics allude to it. So if you read the Meditations, you'll see several places where he says things like, view earthly things as if looking down on them from a high point above, which is what we're going to do today. But it wasn't until 1981 that the French scholar Pierre Hadot, in Philosophy as a Way of Life, introduced the phrase. And he thought it was a really important concept for pretty much all philosophies. So he talks about Plato, for instance, not just Stoicism. And then Donald Robertson, who I'm sure is well known to many of you. He's actually the guy who we've really got to thank for making the view from above so well known in Stoic circles. So he wrote a whole chapter on it in Stoicism and the Art of Happiness. And in Stoic Week, he created guided meditations, which are available. And you might well like to, if you like the view from above, you might well like to have a look at those and play them afterwards, because his are slightly different from mine. The ones I've created today allude particularly to the two extra virtues and are also in the time of the pandemic, which is where we are now still. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to play you something called The Pale Blue Dot. Now, this is from Carl Sagan, who was not necessarily a Stoic, but I think you'll see that these ideas resonate quite well with Stoicism. So I hope the sound quality on this is going to be okay. It's about 3.5 minutes long. What I want you to do is to listen to this, watch this, and just notice what comes up for you. It's as simple as that. And you might want to put things in the chat after the exercise. But the next 3.5 minutes, take it away, Carl.
That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives.
Powerful stuff. What did you think? You can put things up on the chat if you like, as to your responses to that. Or you might just want to jot it down, because I'm going to be asking you for your main take-homes from the whole session. And it may be that Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot resonates very strongly with you, and there might be some ideas that come out of that.
Tim, may
yes.
I suggest one thing? How
Indeed.
about we stop sharing the screen, give a couple of minutes for people to put in their first impressions.
Yeah.
So folks, go ahead and, you don't need to write an essay, just your first reaction, just your first thoughts. Just put them in the chat. We'll give you 2 minutes, or actually one more minute.
Doesn't matter if everyone writes at once, does it? That's the beauty of this. Wow, I can see. Humbling. Powerful. Perspective changing. Yeah, that's one of the things that the view from above can do, is it gives us a different perspective. Timely. Humility. Commonality with other Earth residents. These are all beautiful insights. Spiritual. Yeah. And we've got a very interesting comment from JB there, that you can look at it two ways when we start to look at our insignificance. And the Stoics ask us to look at it in a particular way. It's really interesting. It's a combination of actually we have the ability to be our best selves by being virtuous, and it's our everyday concerns are seen to be trivial. So it'll be interesting to see whether other people find the same response to the view from above. Okay. So that's a nice introduction, I hope, to the view from above. And what we're going to do now is go back away from the view from above for a minute and talk a little bit about Stoicism and the pandemic, because that's my other theme for tonight. Is you've probably heard a lot about Stoicism and the pandemic, and that's because Stoicism, it's very helpful, I would say, at all times, but during a crisis, what philosophy do you want? Well, Stoicism's a big contender, isn't it? And I know that Stoicism's been helpful because I've been speaking with my clients about it, with friends about it. In fact, one of my best friends suddenly became a Stoic, which was amazing, and did the SMRT with me and Donald and he benefited a lot from it, and so did thousands of others, more importantly. Because look, I've started to crunch the numbers from SMRT, and I can say that being Stoic did increase well-being a lot during the pandemic, but no more or less than normally does, to be honest. So what are the elements of Stoicism that would be included in a very simple version of Stoicism? Because obviously Stoicism can be very complex. There's lots been written about it. The ancient writers, the modern writers. So what we do in the modern Stoic team is we try and keep things simple, but still very relevant and true to Stoicism. So we might start off with the dichotomy of control, talk about exercising the virtues. Stoic mindfulness, the idea that this isn't just something that we pull away in a drawer, we practice it every day, every moment if we can. And we have daily Stoic practices to build and maintain our Stoicism, like morning meditation and evening review, for example. Does that sound familiar to people? It will sound pretty familiar to people who have done Stoic Week or SMRT. So that's Stoicism, and Stoicism made simple. And this is the version that I often present at conferences and things if I'm asked to present a really simple version of Stoicism. What would Marcus Aurelius do in the center? I'd love to have that t-shirt. I don't know if you can see my actual t-shirt, probably not, but it's one from Stoicon in Athens. I'd love to have that t-shirt. But anyway, you might start with the dichotomy of control. What is under my control? What isn't under my control? And then for the things that aren't under your control, you accept them. For the things that are under your control, you think, which virtue do I need in this situation? And the four cardinal virtues are wisdom, courage, self-control, and justice. So you're looking at things through the lens of the virtues. That's very important. And as I said, you do this paying constant attention to your judgments, using Stoic techniques in the moment, including those Stoic maxims. And you, as I said, it's Stoic practice that kind of builds this. Last week, I know that some of you may have seen an excellent presentation by Greg Lopez, who talked about the three disciplines. So I just added how this isn't quite the same framework as the three disciplines, but it kind of connects with it. So that's Stoicism made simple. And let's have a little think about how that's relevant to the pandemic and beyond, as we're moving to a stage which is still very much affected by the pandemic, but perhaps not in the center of the hurricane at the moment. Some of you may have seen this on social media, the Stoic Fox. So this was a while ago, but the idea was that you can't control the actions of others, the amount of toilet paper at the store. You can see it was a while ago, how long this will last. You can control things like your attitude and what you do, okay? So that was the dichotomy of control in a very practical way applied to the start of the pandemic. Now that gets us part of the way, but we also need to think about the virtues. And I love Larry Becker's expression of becoming a virtuoso at living, because sometimes we think of the virtues as something a bit old-fashioned and irrelevant. But who doesn't want to be a virtuoso at living? So the idea is that virtues are qualities which, given the human situation, enable us to live as excellent human beings. And those are the four cardinal virtues that we've talked about. So I won't read all of that out. But if you're interested, Chris Gill, who is kind of, I see him as my mentor, really. I've written articles with him. He introduced me to modern Stoicism back in Exeter a number of years ago when he pulled together a group of academics and psychologists to start the modern Stoicism movement. So he and I wrote that dialogue together, which talks more about Stoic values and virtues. But the question I want to consider today is, how does this apply to the pandemic? Well, in a number of ways. And here are just some thoughts. If we're approaching our situation wisely, we'll be well informed. We'll understand what matters most. We'll understand the risks. You know, we'll understand the risks of not wearing a face mask or wearing a face mask, which is really quite controversial. I mean, in this country, in the UK, it's been very, you know, some people have been wearing them, some people not, and it's not particularly a political issue like I know it is in the States. It just hasn't been clear. So wisdom would also include being comfortable with that kind of ambiguity and just making a judgment call. Okay, courage means doing what it takes, overcoming fears where it's wise to do so. So I know a number of people who are kind of very anxious about going out because they kind of haven't been out very much in the last few months. So it takes courage to go out when they realize actually it's safe to do so, or safe enough. Self-control, well, don't we all need more of that? So managing unhelpful urges and impulses, ranting on Twitter. Well, you may not rant on Twitter, but you may spend too much time on social media or news sites, and then you might need more self-control because you want to be well informed, but you don't want to be frightened, or you don't want to hear kind of lots of contradictory things from unreliable sources. So I hope this is making sense as we move on to the fourth of the cardinal virtues, and justice, which means being fair to everyone. So that might include wearing a mask as you go out, because it's kind of is known to protect other people, even if it doesn't protect you as much as we'd like it to. And it means being fair to people we don't agree with and to those less privileged than ourselves. So that would be a good Stoic take, I think, on how to deal with a pandemic. But as I told you earlier, I am familiar with positive psychology, which is the science of well-being. And with this magnum opus by Chris Peterson and Martin Seligman called Character, Strengths and Virtues, what did they do? Well, those are two psychologists who they led a project which was doing a very detailed literature review of wisdom studies, of cultures. And what the question they were looking at is, what is it in various cultures across the ages, what character qualities have been seen to be good? Good for the person themselves and good for society. In other words, what are the key virtues across time and across cultures? And guess what? They came up with the Stoic Four, but they also came up with a couple of others, which they labeled Transcendence and Humanity. What are they? Well, transcendence means connecting with what is larger than us. And humanity includes things like love, kindness, and compassion. Not quite the same as justice. Sometimes in Stoicism, we wrap that up into justice, but justice is more about distribution. This is more about care, regardless of the distribution of well-being or desert. So I got to thinking, are these things missing from Stoicism, or are they things that are there in Stoicism but just haven't really been highlighted yet? And the answer is the second one, that they are both in Stoicism, very much there. And that's what we're going to look at next. So Stoicism and transcendence, connecting with what is larger than us. And I think for Stoics, it would also be living in accordance with nature, living wisely, which would mean seeing things as they really are, not just from our very narrow perspective, but from a wider view in terms of looking at things from other people's points of view, looking at things from the point of view of the whole universe, looking at things from different time perspectives. So does that make sense? That we tend to see things just from our very narrow egoistic perspective. So transcendence means going beyond all of that. So if you look at the whole Stoic worldview, there's a whole host of things that the ancient Stoics believed, some of which we may find credible, some of them less credible. But I just chose a few of them that I think are particularly relevant and also pretty acceptable. So here are the things that I chose. We're a tiny part of the world. Agree with that? A tiny part of the cosmos, even more so. And we may have an inflated view of our own significance. It's not just politicians that do that. It's all of us. Stoics believe there is universal determinism, that there is causation and a web of causation of which we play a part. So although we're constrained, we still have an impact, particularly if we focus on the right things. So you can see how the dichotomy of control might be rather useful there. Focus on the things you can control and act virtuously, because we all share the potential for rationality. There is in Stoicism the idea that the the cosmos is kind of imbued with rationality, and we have this, what they call the divine spark. We could say that there are kind of laws of nature and laws of human nature, and the ability to reason. And this completes the kind of system. We have the potential for rationality, and we achieve this by cultivating the virtues. So actually, it's by cultivating the virtues that we don't just kind of self-actualize, but we actually become more in line with our true nature. So that's very interesting, isn't it? And it's kind of goes beyond what you see by just thinking about the dichotomy of control, and even beyond what we get by looking at the four cardinal virtues. Now, did the ancient Stoics talk about this? Yes, they did. So one Stoic virtue emphasized by Cicero, which may be developed by the view from above, is called magnanimity, which doesn't feature very largely in our conversations, does it? But that's also could be called a great-souled person, or you could call it just a big person. It's the kind of person who rises above the trivial, who rises above adversities. So have a think about that as a virtue. So not someone that isn't small-minded, mean-minded. They rise above the situation. They see the big picture. Now, Pierre Hadot and A.A. Long talk about cosmic consciousness and cosmic connectedness as well. And if you want to read a nice article that kind of talks about Stoicism and Transcendence, have a look at this article by Brittany Pollard, who says, Stoic Transcendence is an active exercise that takes us to a new level of understanding about the world. When we view a disappointing event from the point of view of the cosmos, and thereby perceive that it's not so disappointing after all, we are practicing transcendence. So, I don't know what you think about that. We'll have a view to develop it further when we do the view from above together. But I'll leave that there for a moment just for you to have a little look at that and absorb it and see what you think about whether that could be practical. Because Stoicism is a very practical philosophy. And maybe the view from above is a way of us kind of getting to see the bigger picture. Okay, so what about humanity? So humanity, as I said, it's not quite the same as justice. It's about love, kindness, compassion. And that is definitely there in ancient Stoicism. And I think it's got two elements. One is what you could call universalism. So the idea that we're all parts of nature, all sharing the same potential for rationality and all worthy of compassion. And one of my favorite quotes, Marcus Meditations 2:1, nor can I be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him, for we are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. To act against one another is contrary to nature, and it's acting against one another to be vexed and to turn away. So it's also there in Hierocles' concentric circles, expanding your concern. This actually, I think, comes from Kai Whiting, and so we can see in his version, it's not just to all humanity, it's to the earth and all the creatures on it, which is a lovely way to think of cosmopolitanism, which may or may not have been there in ancient Stoicism, but it's a very nice development. So, how about that? Humanity and transcendence, they're not just there in positive psychology and neglected by Stoicism. They are there in Stoicism, but perhaps there is scope for us cultivating them more. So, we are now, are you ready for this? Are you ready for the view from above meditation? So this is, as I said, it's a meditation that I've written specially for this presentation. And it can be a powerful exercise, the view from above. So I'm kind of giving it a slight health warning because if I was doing this in a coaching session, I would say someone, you know, are you feeling a bit wobbly? Have you had any losses recently? And if they were, I might suggest that they not to do this because we don't know what the impact will be. So I am encouraging you to do this if you feel up to it. But if you're feeling emotionally fragile, or in the past, kind of these exercises have had an adverse effect on you, then it's fine just to take a step back, make a cup of tea, do whatever you like, and then come back in about 7 or 8 minutes. But I hope that most of you will want to take part. And so if you do, I've got some pictures here, which I'm very proud of, because they're the view from above New York, for instance. But actually, what I'd like you to do is to close your eyes, if you're willing to do so, and not really look at the screen for the next 10 minutes or 7 or 8 minutes, perhaps. Because what I'd like us to do, as I said, is a meditation together, and we'll see what you can learn from it. Okay? So, now is the time, if you want to take part in the meditation, to close your eyes and really focus on this view from above experience for the next few moments. I want you to really enter into this and imagine that although you're still sitting where you are also leaving your body, stepping out of everyday consciousness to go on a journey from where you are to the outer cosmos. In your mind's eye, you're taking that journey. So first imagine yourself flying. You've flown out of your body and you're flying like a bird in the sky, looking back down at yourself. And as you fly higher, you can see hundreds of people in your neighborhood. I wonder what you notice. Perhaps people are scurrying around in their everyday activities. They might look like they're doing different things, but actually, aren't they all the same? Everybody's striving for happiness, and most people are getting upset from time to time in their own melodramas. And some of them may have the same kind of concerns as you. Some of them may have similar interests. And as you see the swarms of people, you realize that there are other people out there just like you, seeing beyond superficial differences in race, class, and wealth. Everyone is, in a very real sense, the same. Can you see that as you look at your town from above? Can you even begin to see yourself as part of a brotherhood or sisterhood of human beings? So in this time of pandemic, you're probably going to notice some people who are really struggling. People losing their jobs, getting ill, maybe even losing loved ones. And as you see from high above these people who are really struggling, I wonder what emotions might be coming up for you. Some people might start to feel some compassion and a desire to alleviate the suffering. And if you do, just notice it. You don't have to do anything about it now, because we're going on in our journey, soaring higher above the earth. You're going higher and higher until you can just make out small figures beneath you, like ants. So you see people just like ants. And just as tiny ants work together to build vast nests, you're realizing, as you see the whole town, that people are working together to produce much more than any individual could. Workers in a factory in one part of town are producing food, for instance, that will be on the table in another part of town, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. It is as if we are all part of the same body, as Marcus Aurelius reminds us. You begin to see that by serving others, you are also serving yourself. And by harming others, you're also harming yourself. For instance, a kind word, being a support to a neighbour or colleague, could empower them and help the whole community. On the other hand, breaking social distancing rules, for instance, could well make things worse for everyone. So the view from above helps us see the great web of causation in its totality, and how there might even be a butterfly effect of small actions having large consequences. So from this perspective, you understand that what you do makes a real difference. You have choices, and they have consequences. So you're soaring even higher, seeing the Earth from the vantage point of outer space, like an astronaut. The Earth appears to you the size of a small globe. And you continue onwards and upwards, and the Earth gets smaller and smaller until all you can see is a pale blue dot. And as you see the Earth as a pale blue dot from outer space, how significant do earthly matters become? You're just one of billions of people on planet Earth. The Earth itself is just one of trillions of planets. From the point of view of the cosmos, how important are any of our everyday concerns? No wonder the Stoics label our everyday concerns as indifference. Things like, which team is going to win? Whose turn it is to do the dishes? What are we going to watch on TV? These are the things people get really upset about. From the point of view of the cosmos, how much do they really matter? At the same time, as you look back on Earth and can see the whole cosmos, you begin to feel something. What is it? Maybe it's a sense of awe, a sense of wonder at the sheer size of the cosmos. How remarkable it is, how extraordinary that there is something rather than nothing, and that human beings, and apparently just human beings, have this potential to reason, to decide what to do, to think about how to live better lives, to do philosophy, to attend meetings like this. And you understand that you are part of the cosmos. You have a part to play. You know you have the potential to be the best version of yourself by developing the virtues of wisdom, self-control, justice, courage, humanity, and transcendence. By becoming a virtuoso at living, you can play your part in the universe as best you can. So I'll leave you to think of the place of human beings in this vast cosmos for a moment more, and what it means. And now we're going to look at things for a few moments from the perspective of time as well as space. So imagine your life from the perspective of your grandchildren. What would you like to be able to tell them about the part you played in the great pandemic of 2020? To them, it might be like one of the wars, like the Second World War is to us. So how would you like to answer the question? What did you do in the great pandemic, Grandma or Granddad? Perhaps think of your answer to that. Doesn't have to be anything grand. It could just be, I did my bit. I supported your grandmum or your granddad who was going through a bit of a tough patch. Or I played my part by doing the social distancing and giving to charity. But perhaps you've been finding the recent months of lockdown rather difficult, quite frustrating perhaps. And it may help to see the pandemic in the context of the seasons of life. Maybe it helps to think of the pandemic as a particularly harsh winter. And what do harsh winters do? They pass eventually. And of course, what follows might be harsh as well, but it might be less harsh than the winter. And summer will arrive in time. There's a natural cycle of good times and bad times. Better times lie ahead. So it's now time, having been on this remarkable journey, to return to Earth. Take a moment to reflect on the various perspectives you've taken. So what have we done? We've seen people are like us. We've seen how everything's interconnected, like an ant colony. We've noticed the difference we can make. We've realized the smallness of human concerns and maybe felt awe at the universe and our ability to reason and talk and think. We may understand better our ability to play a fitting role in the cosmos by cultivating the virtues. So what have you experienced in the last few moments? Maybe it's about emotions as well as what you've learned. And what message do you want to take forward to tomorrow and the rest of your life? So, when you're ready, open your eyes and come back into the room. And you might want to jot down, because obviously we're going to do this in the breakout groups a bit later, but you might want to jot down your take homes from that particular experience and your message to yourself and others from the view from above, and whether you found it a good experience, whether it's something you'd like to try again and perhaps make part of your regular practice. Okay, so is everyone still there, or are you still at the outer regions of the cosmos? You can write on the chat here. I'll just stop for a minute just for people to write stuff on the chat, just to share some initial, just to get some initial feedback from that meditation exercise. And if anyone didn't take part, we'll give them time to come back and catch up with us. So Debbie fell asleep. Interesting. Carl Sagan used to do that. I used to listen to his program on the cosmos, and it always got me to sleep. So Stoic Dan liked the pandemic being like a harsh winter. Enhanced a sense of unity and patience with loss, Bruce says. Debbie says she did hear me. Okay. Adam says it felt really like travel with its change of perspective and refreshment. Good. We got at least one wow. So as I said, it can be powerful. It can be a bit unpredictable, what's coming up, which is why I gave it a slight health warning. Incredible to see how little annoyances are so irrelevant, says Emily. It's right, isn't it? Good perspective to feel connected to something bigger. Okay, so as I say, we'll get more of a chance to kind of, for you to share these experiences and your thoughts on what we've talked about today in your breakout groups a bit later. People talking about patience, looking internally. Ah, yes, a bit of time for looking at internally. So let's go back to Stoicism made simple, but made perhaps a bit better, I hope. So do you remember this? Do you remember this t-shirt? And actually, when it said, what would Marcus Aurelius do? And it didn't have this, it was telling a bit of a fib. Because if you read the Meditations, it is full of this. It is full of transcendence. It is full of humanity. So much more than, I think, things like justice. So let's see how we can add the virtues of transcendence and humanity to our Stoic framework. So we'll start off with the dichotomy of control. So what isn't under our control is the cosmos and the human situation. Can't do much about that. But we can affect our perspective on the cosmos, which maybe the view from above gave you a different perspective, and our perspective on the human situation. And we can control what we do about it. Does that make sense? And coming on to the virtues, obviously we add the virtues of humanity and transcendence. Do you think that might be useful? A useful addition to your lens of the virtues, to think about humanity and to think about the bigger picture in your Stoic practice. you can do the view from above. And there may be some extra maxims to add. Remember these maxims that you have ready at hand. And as part of your Stoic mindfulness, you can remember the big picture and use the maxims. So all that remains for me to do, actually, apart from listen to your kind of questions and the breakout groups, is to think of some maxims that might follow from that view from above. So look, here are 6 that you might have noticed that most of these were embedded into the meditation. But these aren't the only 6. So I'm going to ask which ones you like the most, and perhaps you can put that in the chat as we go along. I'll just read them out and just put them in the chat. Whether we could have a vote, couldn't we? Which of these maxims is your favorite? So there are others around me who are just like me. Who wants to give that a vote? Put it in the chat if you want to vote for that one. Just trying to get the chat up again. Oh, there we go. So there are others around me. Yeah, so that's got a vote. Let's carry on. So the second one is, by becoming a virtuoso in living, I play my part in the cosmos as best I can. Who likes that one? So that's linking the virtues with being part of the cosmos. And that might be an answer to the thought, oh, it's all meaningless then. No, it's not It's not meaningless, because we've got a part to play and we can make a difference. Everything is connected. That's kind of like the system. We're all part of a system. And we have choices and there are consequences. What can I tell my grandchildren about the part I played during the great pandemic of 2020? When I did this or something similar with a coaching client, this was the one that he particularly liked. Like the seasons, everything passes, even a pandemic. Better times lie ahead. And from the point of view of the universe, it really doesn't matter if someone insults me or if my wish is frustrated. So one of the things I'd like you to do in the breakout groups, although I think I'll hand back to Shrikant in a minute to see if he wants to do Q&A or breakout groups next. But when we have the breakout groups, that'll be one of the questions I'd like you to consider, kind of reflections on the whole of the presentation, but also what other maxims could you have ready at hand that connect with the view from above? So I'm going to stop the share and hand back to Shrikant.
Thank you, Tim. That was amazing. So what I want to do is that I think you have established such a great context that I want people to kind of meditate on that and talk about that in the breakout rooms first. Then when they come back, they will share their takeaways and we will do Q&A after that. I don't want to interrupt this great context that you've set up. I think the best way to use that is to go to the breakout rooms and discuss it in small groups and then come back with that. Does that make sense to you?
That's
okay.
Perfect.
All right, folks. So I'm starting out the breakout rooms now. You will automatically be transported like magic into breakout rooms. Reflect on what you've experienced. And then in exactly 25 minutes, you'll automatically come back in this room and we'll be sharing our takeaways. And then you can ask any questions. You'll have opportunity to ask questions after everybody talks about their takeaways. I'm starting the breakout rooms now.